Hi, I'm Kate Sains, editor of The Money Pages, and I'm joined today by Aaron Tyson, who's going to be talking to us about financial advice. Hello, Aaron.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me. Yes.
So you're a financial advisor.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your job and what a financial advisor does.
I think the sort of main things that people think of are kind of maybe investments, or maybe that's kind of a bit of a closed door to people. But the main things that I do are really to work for growth, working with clients for growth, for investments and pensions, but also a big part of the job is to try and take drags away from growth. For example, tax is a big one. So it's really kind of a holistic sort of overview of people's goals, how to achieve them, how to get from point A to point B. It doesn't really matter about the size. It's more about sort of understanding what vehicles are best to do that for clients. And it sounds complicated, but really it isn't when you get into the detail of understanding what clients' sort of drivers are, what their position is, and then the advice sort of comes from there on, how do we achieve what you would like to achieve, essentially.
Okay, so would somebody come to you then, rather than saying, I've got this money and I want to invest it in stocks and shares, would they maybe say to you something like, I want my children to go to university in 10 years' time, and I'd then like to buy a property in Spain in another 20 years' time. How do I achieve that? Is that more?
Absolutely, it's both, because some will be like, I've received an inheritance, I don't know what to do with it, what would you advise? Should I buy property, should I do this? And it's kind of understanding what the implications are for each individual client. In terms of investing, should I put it in stocks? The risk in that scenario would be, investing. Stock picking is very hard. I don't do it. Financial advisors generally don't do it because the risks are too large, for a company to just go bust. And the main thing that we sort of look at for clients is to invest in a diversified way, so things are able to grow in a sort of stable manner well into the future. But yeah, it's often goal related. It can be for retirement. Sometimes people won't have a goal. We just want to make sure that the fund is doing something, is growing in some way, and that can be compounded into the future. But often it's, I want to buy property abroad, I want to buy this, or university fees, as you said, or simply retirement. Retirement's probably the biggest goal, to make sure there is extra fluidity.
So when do people generally come to you? At what stage of life are they in?
All sorts. I mean, I think that the more people, unfortunately, the more people earn, the more likely they are to speak to a financial advisor, because of the 60% tax trap over 100,000 that's earned, where you lose your personal allowance for every £2 that's over.
Okay, so can you explain that to us?
Yeah, of course. So over 100,000.
Is that earning 100,000?
Yes,
okay.
Earning 100,000 for PAYE, but also I think for self-employed also, you lose £1 of your personal allowance, so the 12,570, you lose £1 of that for every £2. So it's basically a 50% tax rate plus your nominal tax on top of that. And then of course, when you're going above the, I think it's 145 figure, then you're going to get the 45%. So people start to think, well, I'm losing a really large portion here, so how can I sort of mitigate that? And there's nothing wrong with trying to mitigate tax as best possible. It's just making sure that that's done in the right ways. So I would say that it can be for a variety of reasons. There's a lady I've been speaking to recently about inheritance planning. She has a liability, and she's just a normal lady. She sort of worked for BA for many, many years. She bought a property, it did very well in terms of the capital growth, as many do, in the London area. And as a result, has a potential big inheritance tax liability, and we've been looking at ways to sort of bring that down. And on the other side, I also had a call for a lady who had £200 that she wanted to invest. And I think the main thing is to understand that the doors are open, to just get that and have that initial chat, and understand sort of what your options will be.
So I'm quite intrigued, if you had £200 to invest, say you got a bonus at work or something, or won a little bit of money on the lottery or something. What would you advise you would start with if you never done any saving before? Wanted to do something really, really beneficial with that 200.
I think that it's about, in that scenario, it's about regular savings, because then that can grow exponentially. With £200, I think that's going to be sort of in a situation where it can be within a deposit account, and you're probably not going to go over your personal allowance, your personal savings allowance. Otherwise, you can put it into an ISA. You've got 20,000 that's tax-free. In terms of, well, 20,000 you can put in, sorry, that's the maximum per year, and then any growth in there is tax-free. And then we've got the new edition of the Great British ISA, but it really depends on, you know, which providers come out, which investment companies come out and offer this, because they may think it's just a short-term thing and it's not worth bringing it out. So probably somewhere between those two, but again, it really depends on, does the client want access to the money? Does the client want sort of freedom to do with it what they will later on? Or what kind of growth do they want? What risk profile are they? All of those are big in deciding on any amount of funds that client have and want to do something with.
Yeah, we should probably also say that the Great British ISA, for the benefit of people watching, is the additional ISA that's been introduced by the Chancellor at the last budget.
That's right, yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. What can you explain a little bit more about that?
The way that ISAs work in the Great British ISA, there's a maximum allowance that you can put in a normal ISA of 20,000. For the Great British ISA, which we'll understand more as time goes on, because it takes time for companies to pick this up, as we mentioned, the maximum for that is 25,000, but only if it's invested within British companies. Okay, well, that's kind of the main.
Yeah. So it's for people who have already invested their 20,000, is it? Or?
It could be. So you could have maximised your allowance for that tax year, and you want the extra 5,000, and you can open up then a separate Great British ISA to then invest in British companies, or you could just do the full 25. So we'll be fairly flexible in terms of that. That's my understanding, but we'll see more as.
Yeah,
as
it'd be interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about was pensions, actually. So when you have a lot of your clients, I would imagine, are coming to you, as you mentioned before, to ask for pension advice and what to do with their pensions. When should people really start thinking about pensions, ideally?
I would say probably in the 30s, because I think if you can keep half an eye on what's going on for your retirement at your 30s, it's going to be a lot easier to be able to retire early and happy than it will be if you're trying to rush it in the last 3 years before retirement. I think it's kind of pretty amazing when you think about it, that the majority of people that I see between the ages of maybe 35 and 50 or 55 even, they know they have pensions, but they've got no idea how much is in them and what kind of retirement income that will give, because we're so busy and we don't think about, we know we're paying into a pension and we think that's it, it's sorted, but in reality it probably isn't. It really probably isn't. And understanding what you can do to improve things or what your retirement goals may be, identifying those early on and, getting the relevant tax advice around it as well is really important. So I would say in your 30s, especially if you've moved around jobs.
Obviously, a lot of people have got workplace pensions, and with auto-enrolment, everybody is now obliged to join their pension scheme and they have to opt out. But is there anything else people can do to boost their pension when they retire? Yeah,
with auto-enrolment, I think actually the long-term plan is really to try to push people back away from the state pension, because the state pension is such a big drain on the UK economy. And obviously people who've paid into it, are very deserving of it. I'm not saying that they're not, but at the same time it is a big financial weighted concern for the future. Auto-enrolment, does put people into pensions with the workplace. It's decided by the workplace. There is probably little that you can do in terms of option for where that's invested and what the charges are, which is one thing. But the most important thing to understand with workplace pensions is that as financial advisors, we don't touch them, because it needs to continue to grow where it is, and the main reason for that is employers' contributions. Matching. If you were wanting to increase your sort of pension size, or looking at what it would deliver sort of for retirement, the best thing to do really is to try and get your employer to match a higher level of pension contributions. It's going to be tax efficient. You're going to build your pension pot very quickly. What we do is primarily look at the pots from before, which are not being paid into anymore. They're sat dormant. There's still charges being applied to them. We don't know how they're performing. You don't know how they're performing. And there's a lot of understanding about what it is and isn't doing. And our job really is to only make improvements. So if we've got a dormant pension pot, it's been actually performing very, very well, we'll keep it where it is and we'll let you know that that's the case. But, the plans for the future would be to bring your older pensions together. You've got one place, exactly what it's doing, what the performance will be. And then when you move jobs later, you add to it. You continue to add to it from place to place. People move around jobs these days very often. So having that facility or bringing in your pension pots together when you're able is probably a good idea.
Yeah, well, it's actually funny you should mention that, because we had a question from Josh from Cambridge who wants to know about just that, actually. So he said, I've worked in a number of companies, including a firm in Australia where I used to live for 2 years. Can I trace my old pensions, and what do I do with them?
Yep, you can. It's fairly easy, but as easy as it comes in relation to using a government-based website. So you've got sort of Track My Pension, Find My Pension, which is available on the .gov website. The main things that they need to know are your national insurance number and the employment history. That will typically give you the idea of who your pension provider is, where the administrator of the pension fund, and what your policy number is. And those bits of information will allow you to then speak to that company or speak to a financial advisor, and they'll be able to get detailed information. In relation to pensions in Australia, I'm not too sure. You probably have to speak to, because another way is to speak to the old employers directly, and they'll be able to then put you in touch with either the firm that put it into place for you or the firm that's you paying the pension into. So
yeah, great advice. Thank you. I've got one more question before we say goodbye. We asked you before the interview if you had a top financial tip for our readers that they can put into action. Could be absolutely anything, just to sort of give them some guidance or something that they can start off doing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily kind of an investment tip or a pension tip. I think the thing that I see growing the most is advice on financial products and the ways that you can do different financial things, mortgages, investments, pensions, on social media from non-regulated people. So that advice is really not tailored in any way. You get all of these, it does this, it does that, and it's all sort of superfluous, and it's sort of the expectation is to deliver much more than it will, and it may not be right for you. So not sort of maybe listening to that or taking an extra pinch of salt. And of course the same goes for family and Bob down the pub who's said, oh, I've done this with my mortgage, or I've done this with my pension. It's really crucial to understand what's best for you. Getting to the core of that is what I do, or what we do as advisors, to make sure that we are growing what you need for the future.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic advice. Aaron, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.